Hey there, it's Jade Simmons. I'm an independent 2020 candidate for President of the United States, and I'm going to be bringing you these almost daily debriefings. So I want to answer a few questions before we get started. Yes, it is true. I am running for president right now in 2020. If you want to know more about my run, know more about Operation Restoration, which is the movement that is powering this run for office, you're going to go to operationrestoration2020.com. Now, I encourage you to share this with anybody who still doesn't know that I exist, is wondering who the heck is she, if they do know, and people who are also looking for a fresh vision for the nation. If you are feeling like me and so many millions of other Americans, and you're tired of watching two parties spend all their time fighting each other instead of fighting for us, fighting with us, then I want to make sure I get to know you better. That's what these daily debriefings will do. Why are they happening so late at night? And why haven't I set time for them? A couple of answers there. Number one, I want to make sure that I'm spending the day gathering a lot of information that you might not have the time to seek out on your own. I think that we need to be the nation that is known for being the most informed, the most clarified in our vision. We should know what's going on in the world around us as well. It's so easy to get stuck with the media outlets that we trust, the one or two that we might turn to. I think it's time now that we begin to broaden our vision and understanding of what's happening in the world around us. So I'm going to take the time every day to digest as much as I can so that I can bring it back to you. How? Unfiltered. You're not going to hear any party spin on anything that I'm saying. Again, I'm an independent candidate, truly unaffiliated independent, which means that I'm not secretly a Republican or secretly a Democrat. I'm coming to you to represent what I call the muted middle. I think there are so many, raise your hand. Aren't there so many of you who you're looking at the candidates who are running, you're looking at the incumbent and you're like, I don't hear myself. I don't see myself represented. Right? So that's why I'm coming to you late at night so I can gather all the information. Let me back up. Why have I not set a time? Can I just keep it real with you? Can I be honest with you? Because I've got kids. Yes, I'm also a wife and a mother. And during this time of our COVID era, like many of you, I am parenting as well as suddenly homeschooling my kids. I am enjoying the extra time, the extra bonding. I dare you to look at this as a blessing in disguise, a time to reconnect powerfully. I'm getting to know, again, my 12-year-old son who would rather spend his whole day in the room, right? So I'm spending my day doing that, and I want to make sure that they are in bed before I go live. So that's just being real with you. That's why this is happening so late at night. If I ever think it's going to happen later than about 10:30, I'll record this for you and set it up so you can see it. It's important to me that you get to understand not only philosophies, platforms, and policy, but that you get an understanding of how I view the world and how I see you in it. I believe that leadership is about identity. It's truly about identity. What that means is that when you look at your next leader, you have the right to feel like you can see yourself in that leader, that you can hear your heartbeat in theirs, and that they are speaking with you. So, if this is exciting, please do share. I want to make sure that everybody who wants to know and needs to know does that. I will also tell you, if any of you are wondering, if you hear me cough, it's not COVID-19, it's allergies. I have a cough drop. That's what's going on. Don't spread any rumors. And I'm also want to answer the question really quickly. The question we keep getting, is this even possible? Why is Jade entering the race so late? Isn't it too late? That's what everybody wants you to believe, that a presidential race should take 2 years. Listen, we know from what we're living through right now that Americans make tough decisions every day. They sometimes make them with only a few hours to spare. And so what I believe is that there is plenty of time for the country to get to know a representative who is looking to represent them powerfully. I also am entering because I don't see any representation that represents me well. And when I say that, you should know that I'm not speaking as an African-American woman. I'm not speaking solely as a Christian. I'm not speaking solely as a wife or as a mother, but that I simply don't see a vision yet that feels like the direction I feel the country should go in. I teach people all the time that when you see a void, you better do whatever you can to fill it. When you see an issue, when you hear something not being spoken about, it is your duty to speak out. It is your duty to prepare to do the job that you feel like you don't see being done. That's why I'm still here. Let's jump into the news. I want to start with good news. Aren't we used to the bad news in the headlines? There's actually something called headline stress that's going around right now. I want to do my part in eliminating that. I want to start with good news. It may have already happened now. Anyone on my team who's watching, check for me. But I know even up to 13 minutes ago, our leaders were meeting to finally make a vote now on this stimulus package. Here's the good news. First of all, it looks like we're going to see some progress on that for real. It's been really getting hung up today. But what I'm really excited about is that Americans are behaving powerfully. This is not the stuff that always makes the news, but even the president talked about it today, how there was, I believe, a 7-year-old boy who was giving up his lunch money to buy meals for people who needed them, that there are students now volunteering to have free childcare for healthcare workers. That is who America truly is. I believe that America might not be built to shut down, as some are saying, but I believe that we are built to make sacrifices. We are built to make powerful sacrifices. So there's going to be a theme here tonight. I believe that the way we prosper as a nation is that we commit to prioritizing people over profit every single time. Now, when you do that, I believe we end up prospering, and we end up prospering much more quickly than if we do the other way around. So there's good news there. There's also good news. Any artists out there, if you're also an artist, I made my early career as a concert artist. So I was very curious to see that he was receiving some funding from this stimulus package. There was a lot of debate over whether an arts institution should get money. Remember this, whenever you hear either side pointing out where the money is going, well, there's always an angle to that. Here's what you have to understand. If there's money going to the Kennedy Center, it's not to the building. It's not to the building upkeep. What's happening is you have an institution that was suddenly out of business. No concerts are happening. No people are allowed to gather. And so a lot of what you were seeing in that package was going towards the people who work in the building. Never be fooled by demonization. It is not of benefit for us to demonize big corporations because it's not a building. There are people in there that are working aside from the leaders at the top. Don't allow yourself to be drawn into profitable demonization. What they did do is they reduced that number from 35 million to 25 million. And I think that's great that the Kennedy Center is going to get funding. Here's what I think we need to be looking for individuals. Artists themselves need to be funded in this time. There are artists who are literally living from engagement to engagement, performance to performance, who suddenly everything has ground to a halt. So while I'm glad that the people who work at the Kennedy Center, who in many cases already had benefits, already had salaries, are going to be getting some relief, we can't forget that there are individual artists out there that still need support. Good news, I promised. Here's the good news about individuals. Are you an individual? You should be excited because they are working to pass what's going to be funding for individuals, right? So we've been hearing a lot about big corporations. We've been hearing a lot about small businesses, which I'm excited. Small businesses are now going to have access to loans with forgiveness. We run a small business here, and that is something that we are going to be looking into as we work to want to be able to keep our workers working. We don't want to have to stop production of what we're doing. I don't know about you, other small business owners, but I have a powerful team. And just because everything has ground to a halt doesn't make them any less powerful. And so I want to be able to support them the way they have been supported all along. And so it's great news to find out that as early as next week, they are trying to work to make sure that all banks that are FDIC insured will be able to give these loans. And guess what? You're going to be able to apply for them and receive them on the same day. That's what the government is saying. Keep our eyes and ears open. Remember that something you hear in a briefing still has to go through a long process of getting approved. And so as a concerned American, not just a partisan American, not a lopsided American, we are looking to make sure that we're not just hearing what we want to hear, but that when we hear what we want, we are waiting around to make sure there is follow through. So individuals as well are going to be seeing direct payments. Yes, why is this good news? There was so much concern, and I shared in this concern that we were only focusing on big business and corporations. Remember back in 2008 when we had that recession, there was a lot of controversy. We bailed out these big businesses, and over time what we saw is they didn't invest that money back into their people. We saw CEOs and people at the top get these really big bonuses. If anybody's going to be getting bonuses right now, needs to be healthcare workers, but that's another story. So the good news is that direct payments are going to families. The government is worried about how do we make sure American workers continue to get paid. So you're going to see some unemployment insurance kick in, some tax incentives kick in, and they claim that in as little as 3 weeks, if they have your depository information, hint, hint, make sure the IRS especially has your depository information, you're going to see that money come into your bank accounts. They may be mailing checks in some cases. So do your due diligence. Don't just sit back and celebrate. Don't pop a cork yet. Watch your bank account. Make sure that you are registered where you need to be, and be sure that you are getting what is due you right now. Why is it due you? Is it because you're a bunch of slackers that need random help and random support that you aren't wanting to pull yourself up by your bootstraps? No. We are considering drastic measures like this in our government because we understand that this sudden halt has created a sudden impact. And so I want us to be careful when we begin to criticize relief that is coming. I want you to really understand it is relief, it is not a handout. So if you see people speaking in terms of these handouts, this free coming, remind them that this was a sudden, unexpected event. Now, I'm not going to spend time tonight. You'll hear me talk about it in later briefings about how this wasn't as unexpected as some say. I have been following the COVID-19 crisis since the end of December. And when I was there were only 6 deaths at that time. And in the span of about 3 or 4 days, we went from 6 deaths in Wuhan, China, up to 100. And I've watched this disease go from China to Iran to Italy. And so we have to be mindful that this is a thing that is moving. It is living. It's a living, breathing organism. And we need to make sure that we are not pretending that it's not what it is. But what's exciting now, I said I'd start with good news, is that there has been movement. And maybe even now, give me comments if you already know if this is true. I know up to probably now 20 minutes ago, they were going to hopefully make a final vote on this. Praise God that we are seeing the two sides finally do what they're supposed to do, which is work together. I think for the last few years, we've watched both sides fight relentlessly against each other when they should have been fighting for us. So why am I running? I'm running because I believe we need to now make an extreme pivot in our nation where we decide that the division is enough. And if you look at it, the division has been profitable only for the people who are already in power. They've either used it to retain power or they've used power to continue to build their base. And that's not acceptable because in the meantime, it's created a stalemate. You see, if you are hell-bent on opposition, that doesn't work either. Because while you're busy opposing the other side is busy catering to their side and they're using the opposition to make their case. And so what's happened is that the American people have been in a stalemate. There's a lot of progress we could be making, whether we're talking about healthcare, whether we're talking about race relations, whether you're talking about growth in the economy. There's a lot of progress that we can make when we are decided now that we're not going to stay hunkered down behind party lines. All right, I promised you a pushback tonight. I've been watching this story for a couple days now and wanted to see how it would play out. Many of you have heard what Lt.Gov from the great state of Texas, which is where I am broadcasting from, Lt.Gov Patrick made a statement that's been pretty controversial. I want to make sure that I don't take it out of context, which is what we often see when we watch the news. So what he basically said was that, when it came to really doing all he had to do to get the economy up and running again, he was all in. Those were his words. And he says he was among those who would say yes to the question, are you willing to take a chance on your survival in exchange for keeping the America that all Americans love for your children and your grandchildren? Now, he could have answered that just as an individual, because he said, yes, I'm willing to make that sacrifice. And he even said, it doesn't make me noble or brave, but he felt like this is where he got into trouble, there were a lot of grandparents out there in this country, just like me. He said he had 6 grandchildren. And he says, what we all care about, meaning grandparents, and what we love more than anything are those children. And I want to live smart and see through this, but I don't want the whole country to be sacrificed. I said at the beginning that I believe my vision for this nation is that we begin to prioritize people over profit. We must prioritize people over party. Now, there's an incredible mindset shift that we're going to have to make as a nation if we're serious about overcoming COVID-19 in a powerful way. Everybody's right. It's going to be over at some point. But it is literally up to us as individuals and up to our government to some extent to how we weather this storm. Economists are telling us there are 2 ways we can get through this. One is in the shape of a U. That's the shape that the economy can recover in. It means that we spend a little bit more time in the bottom of that U here. And then the climb back up is a little bit slower, but it's more thorough, right? Now, a V shape is what everybody wants. It's what the president wants. It's why you'll keep hearing him say that we need to be up and running in 2 weeks. He's going to put a deadline on it and say, let's go. And we'll talk about that in a second. But the V means that we had a sharp, sudden decrease. This is what's happened. That's why we've ground to a halt. And what he's hoping, and many are hoping, is that instantly we move upward. There are a couple of reasons that the V is not possible. Now, you are talking to someone, you're not going to find a more positive person than myself. You're not going to find someone who always looks for the bright side and believes that with God, all things are possible. You're never going to see me speaking negatively or as a naysayer, but it is so powerful and important right now that your leaders speak to you from a place of hard truth. You see, the big mindset shift, I promised you this in the caption there, the big mindset shift that we're going to have to make as a nation is that asking people to make a sacrifice is not the same as sacrificing people. I'll let that sink in. Asking people to make a sacrifice is not the same as sacrificing people. In our current handling of this epidemic, and when I say our, I mean me and you, as well as our government, is that we have downplayed this thing to the point where we have unwillingly sacrificed people. So there's a little blood on our hands, but it was unwilling. Now we have the choice to decide how we handle this. And if we're not careful, we will be willingly sacrificing. You see, when Lieutenant Governor Patrick said what he said, I instantly thought of my mother, who is 70, and my kids, her grandkids, my 6-year-old and my 12-year-old, and I thought, can't speak for her. That's not how she feels. You're not going to find a better martyr than my grandmother. Than my mother. She will do anything for her grandkids. But my mother is also in school right now getting a PhD. This is a lady who at 70 understands she still has so much life to live. I believe that we need a nation that values all demographics, all age groups. You see, America has a dirty little secret in that we have been known not to quite value our senior citizens as other countries do. We don't revere them in the same way. In this statement, although it was made by someone in the same age bracket, I think was reckless. And it was also thoughtless in the sense that we have, I think it's something like 2.4 million children who are raised by their grandparents, meaning that's their primary caretaker. I'm not talking about the grandparent who just takes them to ballet every now and then. I'm talking about the grandparent who lives with them, cooks all their meals for them, does their homework with them. So before we so carelessly say that all grandparents are ready to just sacrifice themselves, we really need to be careful with our words in this season, because what our words will do is they'll tell us what's really in our heart. And I think what many of people have been concerned about, myself included, is that the way that we've handled this virus has shown a disregard for senior citizens. So here is my personal apology to senior citizens for the way that we have spoken about you, the way that we have dismissed you as we have worked to handle this crisis. I believe that When you look at boomers, when you look at senior citizens, and you're looking at an incredible resource that we have. This is a pool of wisdom that we need to continue to pull from. Forget how they serve us. Remember that they have valuable lives to live that are going to impact those of us, right, that are also younger and are still here. So I want to push back on that statement because it really shows that in the handling of this, we have begun to prioritize profit over people. What do I mean by that? Here's the thing. No matter what, the economy will suffer. The economy has suffered. It's already a done deal. It was inevitable in the handling of this, but even if we had handled it better, the economy would have still taken a hit. Since that is inevitable, the thing we must do now is to make sure that our people are protected to the highest degree. What is that going to require? This new mindset of sacrifice. I believe that America is uniquely built to be generous in how it sacrifices. I'm up with you late at night tonight. Those of you who are tuning in, I told you I have little ones that I had to put to bed. We're still employing some help that we used, and they're more than help, they're family, right? My family is privileged to use and have a nanny, to have housekeepers, and the housekeepers aren't able to come during this time. So what does that mean? They're going to need some sort of relief. Suddenly their calendars are wide open. They're not able to do the work that they know how to do and that they enjoy and are passionate about doing. And so we now, as just homemakers and home people who take care of homes and families, are having to look at how can we sacrifice on our end to be unexpectedly generous to the people who have been serving us nonstop before this crisis hit. I've been challenging a group to think about how to powerfully serve. I think Americans are uniquely built to serve unexpectedly, to be unexpectedly generous, and to make sacrifice in art form. What does that mean? Here's the sacrifices we're called to make right now. Stay at home. If you're a busybody, I know you're restless right now. If you're a mover and shaker, if you love to work out at the gym and not at home, I know this is hard for you, but this is the sacrifice that is required. There are things that we're going to have to do differently as small business owners. All these are sacrifices that we can easily say yes to, not easily, that we should say yes to in spite of the fact that it is tough. What we should not do as leadership, this is really not on you, is that we as leaders must not decide, that different demographics are worth more than the others. We must make sure that everything that we're doing in terms of relief doesn't start at the top and stay at the top. It must trickle down, which is why I believe in starting a lot of the relief at the bottom, so to speak, amongst workers and amongst people. Here's why that works. Not just because I have a bleeding heart. It works because Americans are capitalists. We are consumers. If we have the means, we will spend the money. So not only are you serving the people in need, but those of us who are able to get out and about when the time comes, believe it, we're going to spend money, right? So the economy will get back moving and shaking no matter what. But I think that when we prioritize things, it must always be people first. Now, there's an issue that's going on now as the president is looking at how to handle this moving forward. Let me tell you how I would handle it. And let me just back up and say, admittedly, anybody right now who is not currently the leader of the free world is only Monday morning quarterbacking. Can I just admit that any of us who are able to sit here in the comfort of our own homes right now, we have the time to think about solutions in a different way, right? We can see things after they have happened. So I think that all of us need to be careful as we put forth our proposals, that we understand that we're not in the hot seat yet. But if I were, one of the things that I would focus on, you've heard a lot about South Korea. I would focus on the testing, what's really necessary. And there's a doctor at Harvard who has said that the key right now, if we want to get out of this thing, if we want to make this U more of a V, the key right now is testing. Now, I know the president has been saying we are testing more than anyone else. I need to personally fact check that. He says that we're now testing more than South Korea. South Korea may be testing less now because they've already flattened the curve in their virus. So when you hear these statements, don't just take it at face value. Whether or not you love the president, whether or not you hate him, Don't take anything you're hearing now at face value. Go and do your research. What you'll see is that South Korea doesn't need to test as much as they were. In their heyday, which was way before we got started, they were testing 20,000 a day. And at that time in Texas, we were testing only 125 a day. So if we are testing more right now than other places, it's probably because we are just now getting to the worst part of the virus, not because we've handled it better, and not just because we're the good old US of A. I want you to understand, as proud as I am of this country, just saying that we are the best doesn't make us the best. Just saying that we have the best and we are the most accurate doesn't make it so. We have to do the work to get to be the best. And this doctor from Harvard, Dr. Shav, says that the key is to test, wait for it, everyone, especially everyone who is symptomatic. And then what he suggests is we would quarantine the infected only, and then you can allow the healthy to go back sooner than later, only if you do the testing. The president disagrees. He believes that because there are certain states right now that don't have many cases. So he's like, why would I quarantine a state that doesn't have many cases of COVID-19? So he thinks we don't need to test the whole state. And the reason he's saying we should go back to work now, he says he does say in his defense that we may test or allow certain parts of the country to go back to work. So maybe not New York, maybe not California, the places who've been hit hardest, but that we might allow some states to go back. Why is that a problem? As I told you, I've been watching this virus since it began. I watched it go from China to Iran to Italy. We watched Taiwan, South Korea, and Singapore weather this way better than anyone else. There were certain measures they took that I won't go into tonight. The reason this is a problem, the president's idea of going back to work early and maybe not worrying about testing in states that don't currently have episodes and instances of the virus, is because we know now that you can be symptomatic or asymptomatic, meaning have no symptoms, for 2 to 10 days. Which means that just because a state right now is showing no cases, it could be because they're not testing as much. It could also be because people don't have symptoms yet. Here's the thing, you cannot have symptoms and still be contagious, which means that you can move around, you could travel from state to state because maybe there's no quarantine, maybe there's no shutdown. You can be carrying the virus, feel healthy as all get out, not know you're sick, and pass it on. And that is what the problem will be. If we operate in that way, nobody wants to be back moving and shaking more than me. Just launching this campaign, we need to be out speaking to you, not just behind a screen. We had just set up months of events to come, which we had to instantly cancel. We'll be going virtual for many of them. Stay tuned for exciting news about that at OperationRestoration2020.com. This is not what we planned. It's not what you planned. But what we need to do if we want to get back to our plans is to hunker down where we are, to quarantine for just a little longer and let this thing not just run its course, but we need the testing to find out who's actually sick. If we can find out who's sick, we can quarantine those only. The rest of us can get moving. But if we get moving prematurely, all we're doing is opening the floodgates to continue to spread the virus. Now, I'm not saying that because I don't like the president. I'm not saying it because I'm a Democrat or a Republican. I am neither. I'm an independent. I'm saying it because I believe we should prioritize at all times people over profit. Here's the silver lining. If you allow people to really heal, if you allow those who have the illness but don't know it yet to find out, to get tested, to allow the illness to run its course, to get treatment, then we can actually get the economy back running. You're going to have workers, if you lift this ban too quickly, if you lift this quarantine too quickly, you're going to have workers who are sick coming home and making their families sick. I think we're going to do ourselves damage. We're going to cost ourselves more time. And I think the hit to the economy will be worse. So right now, we're waiting to see what the president's call is going to be, whoever the next president is. And I am vying for the opportunity to lead the most unified, most inspired, most activated nation ever. But whoever steps into the White House in 2021 will be dealing with the aftermath of this. And I believe that you deserve, every citizen in any nation deserves a leader who will always prioritize people first. Let me save you a little bit of blood pressure. Those of you who've been watching the president and you're upset with the fact that he seems to always prioritize the economy. You can only lead how you have lived. You can only lead how you have lived. We elected President Trump, the people who voted for him, many because of his business background, right? So he's literally wired to think about business, economy, numbers, stock market first. It is his MO. So if you don't like what you're seeing, if you believe that people should be prioritized first, you're going to have to elect a leader who is wired to think about people first. But how do your leaders see their people? Does your leader see people as commodities, as resources, as products, as things that aid success, right? Are people only the generators of the economy? Are people only the things that spend money to make more money? If you see people that way, then all of your solutions will be generated from a profit-centered standpoint. If you see people not only as potential, not only as our nation's greatest resource, but if you see them as individuals who have a right to not only life, but a good life, to be able to live abundantly, if you see people as being equal, if you see big business people as being equal to people who work for low wages, and you believe that they should all have at least the opportunity to pursue a life worth living, your solutions for the nation are going to be people-centric. So what we believe at Operation Restoration is that policy should be purpose-based, understanding that each individual has a purpose on this earth, and that part of our job as leadership is providing the atmosphere and the environment for people to be able to thrive for themselves, right? So what are all the tools people need? What's the access people need to thrive for themselves? That's the kind of solutions we want to search for, purpose-based, people-focused solutions, people-focused. All right, I want to end a bit now, going back to the stimulus. Hopefully this package has passed. Those of you just joining in, check your bank accounts because deposits are supposed to be on the way very soon, within, I believe it is 3 weeks. And within 1 week, those of you who have small businesses will be able to apply for loans that supposedly will also be forgiven. So make sure you're doing your due diligence to make sure you're in on that. Senator Gillibrand said when they were looking at the package a couple of days ago that her concern, this is also mine, was that as we began to bail out big business, we make sure that they reinvest in their people. She also felt like the funding was way too low for hospitals. One of the things that we will have to prioritize now, this is the point that I will end on, is that we have to make sure that our healthcare workers are being taken care of. One of the things that I believe in, I don't believe that we'll be able to have free college for everyone, but I do think we need to look into debt forgiveness for medical students and nursing students. I think we need to incentivize. I mean, look at how our healthcare workers are overworked right now. I would love to see healthcare workers coming out of school and going to work in some of the most underfunded, underserved communities first because their loans are being forgiven. Right now, what we're seeing is medical students are getting out and their debt is so crippling that they have to go right away into specialty practice or high-level practice. They can literally not afford to work in the communities that need them most. And so I think there's a way to begin to reverse that. I think if bonuses are going to be going anywhere, they should go to our first responders. I'd be curious if you agree with that. So instead of CEOs, when this thing starts to wind down and we get lazy and take our eyes off of this money that's being used for bailout right now, I believe if bonuses are going to go anywhere, they need to go to first responders. Senator Gillibrand said that they should be looked at as wartime. They're working in a wartime right now. I believe it's a crisis period, and that if we're going to give bonuses, that's who it should go to. All the overtime, all the extra shifts, and the extra exposure to danger that our healthcare workers are facing. I don't want us to be like China was. China found themselves understaffed. And do you know, and I promise you this is not sensational, I'm not sensationalizing this. When they were at their lowest with healthcare workers, they were, throwing up these fast put together makeshift spaces for medical care. And their medical workers, their doctors and nurses, were beginning to die from the virus. And the incentive they were offering for more healthcare workers to take the risk now of coming and working with COVID patients was they were saying, if you come and work for us, we're going to promise you martyr status. I'm not making that up. They were promising their healthcare workers martyr status. I'm sorry, that's not an incentive. That is not an incentive. I believe in the sanctity of life from the womb to the tomb. And I think that that means that we must care for those who are caring for us as well. I think we can do better than martyr status. I know that we have it in us. This is a time, I believe, for willing sacrifice. It would be normal now to lean into self-preservation, to throw others, grandparents, senior citizens, millennials into the pit to save ourselves. But when there's so much that each of us can stand up for and stand to give up, we should do just that. I believe we have it in us to dig deeper and look at how we can serve our neighbors around us, how we can serve the workers that have been serving us so powerfully. What can we find? What can we look for? What can we give unexpectedly that would just bless those around us? I believe we're the home of the free and the brave, but that doesn't mean that we get to do whatever the heck we want because we want to be free. What being free means is that we can do whatever we can because we are free and able to do so. There's a difference. We do the hard thing before we are asked because our leaders may not be brave enough to ask us to do so. You hear what I just said? As individuals, do the hard thing before we're asked because our leaders may not be brave enough to ask us to do so. We stay home, we quarantine ourselves before we have no choice. We protect our neighbors and our loved ones before we have the symptoms. We spare our healthcare workers the risk by not behaving recklessly now and needing their emergency care because of it. Shutting down is a sacrifice. I know our president said we're not built to shut down. I believe we are built to sacrifice. Sacrifice is honorable. Our country is built for that. I think Americans really understand what it means to sacrifice. An economy can and will be resurrected. People, though, not so much. It has always bugged me how we have talked about this being the same as the flu or losing more people to the flu every year. Let me tell you, even one death that is unnecessary is too much. I already said at the beginning, we have been unwillingly, because of our lack of preparedness and because of we as individuals to adhere to what we should be doing, we have unwillingly sacrificed many people who did not deserve, either through misinformation to not know how to take care of themselves, through misinformation to take the wrong stuff. I have a family member who has lived with lupus, and he says now there's a shortage of the hydrochloroquine because that's what people with lupus take, because everybody's running out and getting that. And you know, there have been deaths now of people who have taken different forms of chloroquine because they thought that was the magic answer. We have to be accountable for what we are sharing, for what information we are spreading. But I believe while the economy will always be resurrected, look at us now from 2008. Resurrection of the economy is possible. Without the miraculous intervention of God, resurrection of people is not. I would rather us use whatever miracles we have us on the living. I'd rather use those miracles we have coming to us on the prospects for our future. First, I say, and I hope you won't be offended by this remark, I think we have to ask forgiveness for the blood on our hands, for the times that we have acted recklessly, for any division that we have shown, for our lack of preparation, for our unwillingness to hear unimaginable words and our refusal to do hard things. I will be asking for forgiveness for that, for myself as well as the rest of the nation. But now, you see, now we get to return from the error of our ways and do all the right things. What's going to be promised? If I am your next leader, I cannot promise you the time that we bounce back from this will be short. Here's what I can promise you. That it will be longer the more we stay in denial. The time for recovery will be longer the more we refuse to adjust to our new reality. And the time will be longer the more we pretend that we can wish this away without making a temporary change in our lifestyles. It will be longer the more we stand and speak in pride. I think every time we get up here and pretend like we have all the answers, like we're not to blame, like we're not doing anything wrong, I literally see that the clock is reset to zero, the recovery clock. I want to be able to have that clock keep moving. I believe every time our leaders stand up and pretend that they have all the answers instead of looking for help in other places. It is not okay to be arrogant in this season. We need to operate in humility and partner with people who have solutions that have already proven better than ours. Here's the thing. I don't see us returning to normal because I don't think we should hope for normal. I don't think we should look to go back to status quo. At status quo, we weren't ready for this moment. At status quo, we still played politics at the worst time ever. At status quo, we saw both sides padding slush funds. That's why the stimulus bill is taking so long to pass. They were doing that while everyday Americans struggled to try to find their way out of the mess that they were in, that we found ourselves in. At status quo, our enemies, meaning from abroad, our enemies have been watching us flounder, and they have been taking notes. Any powerful nation worth its salt should be looking at us to see how we handle stress, how we handle overwhelm. They should be looking, and you better believe they have been. I want you to pay attention to what's been going on in Saudi Arabia. They are only doing what they're doing because they know that we have been preoccupied with COVID. They know that our hands are full. And so you're now watching the economy being shifted about by a couple of players making decisions. We don't want to go back to normal. I say we must commit and get excited about a new normal. That's an era where we get to claim that we can come out of this not as a red country, not as a blue country, or having experienced two completely different realities during this epidemic. You know, the stats say that Democrats and Republicans are experiencing two different realities right now. That's ridiculous. We should come out of this as a blended nation. I say proudly purple, being able to say that we survived this thing together. I think we're going to thrive after we come out of this if we decide to bond together now. I think that our new normal looks like, I get excited, you'll have to excuse me, our looks like families who were quarantined on one side of this are now coming out of it newly bonded, newly reconnected like never before. Our new normal looks like companies remembering their original purpose was to serve and not just to profit. I think we're going to come out of this with bosses remembering what it was like to be an employee. I think we're going to come out of this with parents remembering what it was like to be children. I think we're going to come out of this remembering, and hopefully seniors being reminded that their lives still have value and that they still have plenty of purpose to live out. We respect that and we honor that. They will know that they are not disposable and they are not expendable. We're going to come out of this thing remembering what it is like to be one nation under God, indivisible. This is our moment to give a lot, not just a little, to agree to some pain now in exchange for real power, real thorough recovery later. This is our moment to step into a new era. Everyone knows, you've heard this, that to whom much is given, much is required. Well, America has been a blessed nation, not a perfect one. We're very flawed in many ways, very divided right now, but we cannot deny that we've been blessed. We are still the richest nation in the world. But I also believe that if you've been given much, then you must also give back much. You must behave better. I think that now is the time that we have to begin to rise to the occasion of what it means to be the best, right? To have the most. That comes with a responsibility and accountability that I don't think we have lived up to yet, but I think it is within our reach. I believe if there ever was a time to step from behind party lines across whatever aisle divides us, America, this is it. I hope you've enjoyed this briefing. Thank you so much for your comments and your compliments. I'm going back and looking now to see if there were any actual. Please use this time. I'll come on mostly every day. Because of the mom thing right now and the homeschooling thing right now. I don't want to promise every day, but I will do my best to come on as often as possible. Why? Because I want you to get to understand my vision for the country. But I think maybe even as importantly, I think it's important that we as Americans determined to be informed, determined to have information that's unfiltered, and get back to the business of doing the most American thing possible, which is to think for ourselves in an independent way, to decide not to be hunkered down behind any lopsided partisan loyalty. We're bigger than that. America is bigger than two sides of anything. We're so much bigger. And I think we're so much better when we function more as people who believe differently, who think differently, who prioritize differently, who operate differently, but who have the same goal of being not just the most powerful nation so we can beat our chest and say that, but to be a nation that truly can look around and say that we are able as individuals to go after the same things in equal proportion, to have access to the best. That can't be just a limited amount of us. But I think if nothing else, right now we're done with the division and we're looking to get to common sense, common ground solutions that serve more than just a few. How do you support what we're doing? You go to operationrestoration2020.com. Donate for sure as we begin to assure our placement on the ballot in all of the different states. We're so excited that this is a viable run. We would not be doing this if it was a symbolic thing only. There is symbolism in this. I believe the message of unification, the message of restoration is important, but this is a viable thing. And so we're excited to begin to share with you over the next few weeks, Wendy, about all the possibilities. But you go to that website, you're going to donate today. You're also going to sign up at the Get Involved tab. We have a volunteer meeting coming up on April 6th. We're just excited about all the innovative ways that we're doing things differently. You won't hear me on this particular broadcast talk much about the other candidates or much about the incumbent. I think what you really want to hear is, well, what are you going to do about it? What do you think? How do you see things? So that's where you'll hear me focus here. But you'll also see more content come out at that website. You'll see a lot of the platforms and policies, the pillars of those. Then on April 1st, you'll check back in and you'll see more of the specifics of these plans and policies. Yes, I do have plans. Yes, we do have policy. And one of the things that we're so excited about is that we begun galvanizing some of America's best and brightest and formulating what we are excited to present as a people-first, purpose-based strategy. So if you have ideas for us, go to that website as well and let us know. OperationRestoration2020.com. How can you help us right now? Share these broadcasts, share the content as it comes out. Find us on Facebook here at Operation Restoration 2020, as well as on Instagram at the same handle. Okay, thank you guys so much for listening, and thank you for sharing information that we believe is not only going to inform, but inspire as well. Have a good night.